Welcome to day 22 of Shadowhunters month, and today it's another book club video. The fourth one, I think. Got one more to go after this one. And my god, these take a lot of effort. For someone who claims to be quite as lazy as I do, I'm amazed I actually did kind of put these kind of videos together. Yeah, it's crazy. And it's crazy that we're nearly at the end of Shadowhunters month as well, you know. Barely like a week to go after this. Is madness. But yeah, this time I'm going to be talking about the Dark Artifices, or Artifices. I googled the way to pronounce it the other day, and I've already forgotten it. I think it was Artifices, but it doesn't matter. Anything goes. And this going to be an interesting one to talk about, really, because this isn't a complete story yet. The third and final book in the trilogy is coming out in just a couple of weeks, December 4th, for people in the UK. I don't know if it differs in different places, but I think for us it's December 4th. I'm so hyped. I'm so ready. It's been a long wait, but I'm almost certain it's going to be worth it, because I've yet to be like completely disappointed with the Shadowhunters book. I don't think that will ever happen. But yeah, the Dark Artifices. I think it was very clever of Cassandra Clare to have introduced the characters, well, most of the characters that we'd be seeing in these books, in like the Mortal Instruments or Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy. So we kind of already had a really good idea about who most of these characters were and what they were about and what their deal was, what their background was, etc. And we already had that attachment to them going into book one of this. Because that just saves the whole, here are who all these characters are, instead of just having to only introduce maybe, 4 or 5 new characters as opposed to every single character being brand new, the way the Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices for the most part had to do. So I think that was kind of a clever move to have already allowed readers who are reading all of the Shadowhunters novels. It allows us to have that emotional attachment to these characters right from the off. We're already rooting for them going into this. So that's kind of half the battle already won when you start the book. So I think that was very clever. Very well planned, I think, in terms of how these characters have been handled already right from the off. And when I was making notes for these, my god, I forgot just how much happens in these books. I found it really difficult to kind of condense down like some major plot points and what happened, so I have left a few kind of details and scenes out when I'm like talking about what happens and everything in these 2 books, because they're absolutely packed. I kind of forgot how bulky those books are. Like, they're heavy books. I've got them over there. I read them so quickly I kind of forgot how much happened and just how long those books are. So like, I think maybe even scraping 700 pages nearly. So I'm excited to find out just how long Queen of Air and Darkness is going to be. Should be interesting. But yeah, there's so much going on in these books, and so many characters as well. Maybe to the detriment to them a bit. I feel like there are a lot of Blackthorn children. A lot. And I would be able to name them all, but I think I would kind of struggle with like the last few. And obviously, some are given more of a focus than others in terms of the Blackthorns. Obviously, Julian and Mark, and I suppose Ty, particularly in the second book, Lord of Shadows, gets a lot of focus. I really like what they've done with Ty, actually, as a character. Very interesting. So we kind of know them a bit better, because just the story warrants them having more of a presence. Whereas some others are kind of left in the background a bit. So it just kind of take me a while to remember who was who in that aspect. So there are a lot of characters to juggle, but I think overall we've got a really great balance of characters so far in the Dark Artifices trilogy, even though there's only 2 of them out at the minute. So yeah, that's what's interesting, kind of going through these 2 books, because I can't really talk about how effective they are as like an opening or a middle entry in a series, because we haven't read the final one yet. So maybe I'll have to do like a follow-up video to this later on down the line once I've read Queen of Air and Darkness and kind of can view the trilogy as a whole in that case. because for all I know there's going to be this amazing setup, and then it falls flat completely in the third book. I'm sure it won't, but there's every chance things like that might happen, and there might be some plot threads that happen in the final book that I'm not going to be a fan of, but I can't talk about that yet because the book's not out. I did not want to plan Shadowhunters month for December, because I didn't want to work all these videos in and try and read a brand new book at the same time, and yeah, December's going to be packed enough for me as it is, so I couldn't just like hold off on doing Shadowhunters month until the book came out. So it's fine. I can do a follow-up video if that's something people are interested in. But yeah, I think we might as well just get right into book 1, Lady Midnight. It's right here. Over here, this Mahosif thing, absolute unit. I really like the covers for the Dark Artifices as well. I don't know if they differ everywhere. I believe that's Emma on the front, from the scene where she's like in the ocean. How many pages is it? Yeah, this is getting on for like 700. It's like 660 something. So they're hefty books, but I think they're really beautiful covers as well. I do get a bit OCD about the rest of the Shadowhunters books I have are like the same height, but these are a lot taller. That does kind of bug me a bit, but I'll look past it. That's just a little nitpicky thing that I have, because I have OCD probably. But anyway, Lady Midnight. So we kick off with the Lost Herondale, I suppose. Kit, not that we really know it at the time, and his father, Johnny Rook, at the Shadow Market. And you know, we kind of get a really good insight and an aspect of the Shadow World that hasn't been explored a lot in terms of the Shadow Market. So I really like how he opened with something new, in this sea of characters and plot threads and everything that we're kind of already familiar with. It's nice that we still had a fresh approach when we kicked off this trilogy. So we got a glimpse into how the Shadow Market was working, and then we have this reintroduction to Emma, who we'd met previously, but obviously she's older now, 17 I believe, and also her boyfriend Cameron. And they kind of interrogate Johnny, I suppose, and he tells them that some bodies have been found and there have been some murders that greatly resemble the deaths of Emma's parents years earlier, which is kind of the big plot thread throughout the first book in the Dark Artifices. So we kind of straight away get a bit of plot injected in as we're meeting some new characters who obviously don't have a huge role to play in terms of this first one, but as we know from reading Lord of Shadows, Kit goes on to have quite a major role to play in the story. So I really like how they set this up, and they kind of set up Kit's existence in the Lost Herondale as well, in Tales from the Shadowhunt Academy. So I really like how it's all kind of linked in. And then parting is such sweet sorrow because Emma breaks up with Cameron. We didn't really have a lot of time to get invested in that relationship anyway. It didn't seem like Emma was too unhappy about the decision, so it makes sense. That's also kind of our introduction to Christina, who I absolutely adore. And we see she's kind of came over from Mexico and she has this really nice bond with Emma. It's really like wholesome friendship, really. Very strong and very close bond with them. And they're like chasing after this fairy who's been kidnapping mundanes. And then one of the victims they find, again, has kind of matched the other murders and have these like mysterious markings on their skin. But because some of the victims of these murders were fairies and because of like the cold peace and everything, Shadowhunters can't investigate it and they can't interfere in that. So they've kind of been told to leave it and you can't investigate this any further. But obviously Emma's kind of desperate to do that because she thinks it's to do with her parents' deaths. So right from the off, we kind of get a sense of where this story might go. And then we get a reintroduction to all of the Blackthorns who all return to the LA Institute. And I really like how this was set in LA as well. I love the idea of having like an institute like quite near the coastline, if you will, quite near the shore, and I really like that image. I think it's quite beautiful. But yeah, they kind of all return from visiting their aunt, so we see Julian again and all the little Blackthorn children. And Emma and Jules have a really nice reunion, but we kind of get another glimpse, like we kind of did almost in their story in Tales from the Shadowhunt Academy, that things have changed with them since they were younger. Not quite sure what, we kind of get hints, but we know things are changing in their relationship, that dynamic is kind of shifting. And for a relationship between Parabatai to have this dramatic shift is a very interesting thing in terms of a plot line. So I was kind of really invested in that right from the off. And we see that Arthur, who's supposed to be running the Institute, is, you know, not all there and very confused and everything like that in another story we kind of found out about previously, which I really liked. And Emma and Julian, along with Christina, kind of decide to just investigate these murders anyway. Come what may, we kind of expected that of them. But I feel like I would probably try my best to investigate them on the sly as well. If it's something so close to home, you know, you'd want to find out the truth, wouldn't you? And we also have an introduction to Malcolm Fade, who of course is not at all important to the plot of the story, barely a presence at all in Dark Artifices. I don't think he turns evil or anything. No, he definitely wasn't evil all along. So we get an introduction to him. It's always nice seeing these new warlocks and stuff. And then we get the reveal that Julian has kind of developed romantic feelings for Emma, as Malcolm kind of confronts Julian about that and wonders if Emma knows. So right from the off we're like, damn, this is getting juicy. And then I think one of the strongest things about Lady in Midnight is the relationship between Julian and Emma and how complex it becomes. And they have several different scenes together when they talk about different things, and it could be like a serious discussion, it could be something about romance and stuff like that. But we keep coming back to these scenes with Julian and Emma throughout Lady Midnight, as the story keeps advancing and advancing. So we kind of see that shift in their relationship changing, you know, every couple of chapters, which I think was really great in terms of exploring and showcasing their very slow kind of change and shift in their dynamic from just Parabatai to a romantic one. So they kind of have a scene where they discuss Mark, because obviously he'd been missing for like 5 years, I think, at this point, where Jonathan Morgenstern had kidnapped him in City of Heavenly Fire. But before we know it, as luck would have it, some of the fairies arrive at the Institute and ask the Shadowhunters to kind of help solve the mystery of like these fairy deaths. And in exchange for that, if they do it within like 3 weeks, they find the killer and stuff, they'll return Mark to them. So the stakes are like, damn. And it's not, I kind of like that Shadowhunters does this really well, I think. It's not like, oh, we have to prevent this and otherwise it's the end of the world, because so many kind of fictions do that, and it's fine, you know. So it does mean the stakes are about as high as they can get. But I love how a lot of Shadowhunter stories, the stakes are very personal, and it's very much kind of grounded in family and friendship and stuff like that. I've always liked that about Shadowhunters, how their threats are a lot more grounded and complex than just the end of the world as we know it. So we have that, and they kind of let Mark stay with them during these 3 weeks to kind of help out. And that's when we get an insight into just how much Mark has kind of changed in his years away, even though he looks like he's barely aged, because time works differently in Fairy. And you know, he's kind of, one of his eyes is a different colour, he doesn't react well when they try to put some runes on him. He's kind of doesn't really remember a lot about his siblings, which is just so sad. And then we just keep getting more and more of an insight into just how much he's been changed, and that's why for me Mark is one of the most fascinating characters in Shadowhunters. I love what they've done with him so far. I mean, not everything they've done with him, which I'll get onto, but I really find him a very complex character, and I love that he was kind of given some moments to shine in the Dark Artifices. And then we kind of see this instant bond and connection between Mark and Christina, which obviously becomes kind of a major thing throughout the rest of the books. And they have like this really nice scene together where Mark kind of feels comfortable with Christina because he doesn't feel guilty about not remembering her because they've never met before. So I liked that kind of instant connection with them. And we learn a bit more about his troubles and just how kind of different he is from the brother they used to know, which is kind of tragic, but it sets up a really, really interesting story and mystery of, can Mark kind of become who he used to be again, or is he lost to, you know, fairy ways? And then we have another moment between Julian and Emma where they talk again, and then they have kind of a romantic moment, like the first kind of boom, something is happening here, which obviously becomes a major plot point. So it's kind of nice that they addressed it right from the off, whereas some things in the Dark Artifices are very much slow burns. I suppose you could argue Mark and Christina could be, or the revelation about Malcolm, and as we later find out about Annabelle being like Lady Midnight and everything. Some of the things in the book are very slow burn. Instead, with this, with Julian and Emma, we know very quickly where this plot might go. And then we see everyone kind of going to Malcolm's house as the investigation continues. We get a bit of insight into how he lives, Magnus showing up and everything. Just a bit more time to focus on the family bonds between all the Blackthorns, so we really get a great idea of the dynamic between all these little individuals. And Julian and Emma go and investigate a house where they're attacked by a guy with an arrow, who kind of later find out to be Diego. So that's a nice bit of setup for that mystery as well. And while they're there, they find out about this event called the Lottery, which kicks off one of the major action scenes. Jules and Emma continue to be attracted to each other, and I really like how the more intense their kind of bond is becoming, the more intense the whole book feels as a whole. You can kind of really feel things heating up before we even kind of know about this power appetite curse thing. So I really like how they kind of foreshadow just how powerful the power appetite curse could be, in the way things really do heat up during the course of the story with Julian and Emma. But also when Mark was dropped off, we were kind of introduced to Kieran and everything, and he pops back up and we kind of realise that Mark and Kieran are kind of sort of maybe a thing, and they were together when they were in the Wild Hunt. But there is very much the birth of a love triangle, because Mark is developing feelings and an attraction for Christina as well, and that seems to be mutual between those two. So there's kind of a complex thing there, because whereas in Mortal Instruments and Infernal Devices I feel like the love triangle took centre stage, there wasn't so much a love triangle with Emma and Julian, and I'd say they're the two main characters in the Dark Artifices. So it's kind of interesting that the love triangle that seems to have to be a thing was kind of given to the secondary characters to elevate their role a bit more, which I really liked, because Emma and Julian kind of have enough obstacles in the way of them being together without having to throw a love triangle in there. And then things continue to escalate with the investigation and everything, and then Emma goes through a portal which ends up throwing her into the ocean. So she's having a bit of a rough time. Julian, kind of through his power appetite bond, starts coughing up salt water, realises Emma's in danger, tracks her down and saves her, and in doing so kind of reveals his feelings for her. And then they kind of do the do, in a cave on a beach, as you would. So I really like how they didn't kind of drag out the inevitable with these two, because there's so much that happens in the Dark Artifices already. I'm glad they didn't waste any time getting jiggy, if you will, because that just kind of allows the escalation of that storyline, and we don't feel the need to like, oh, hurry up and just make out already. We kind of get it fairly early on in the story, so I really like that. And in the background of all this, we have like Ty and everyone working on translating the runes on like the victims' bodies and stuff. So we get a bit more revelations about that. Because, you know, it's not all romance. There is a plot going on in Lady Midnight. And we get the proper introduction of Diego, and we see like his links to Christina and everyone. Kind of, it feels very much in a similar vein to how they brought Jordan into the Mortal Instruments as like, you know, the past connection to Maya. It's kind of in the similar vein with Diego and Christina, just obviously in different circumstances. So kind of like that almost symmetry with that story. And then the followers attack the Institute, and following all of this, Emma finally confronts Julian because she's kind of spent the whole book knowing that something isn't quite right with him, and he really is struggling with something. Well, more than one thing, really, the poor guy. And then we get this like tragic revelation that Julian has kind of been running the Institute all by himself because Arthur's just not in the right state of mind to run it anymore. And, you know, at the same time he's been raising all the kids and everything. So, you know, that's a thing. And I really like that kind of revelation. I really do eat up like these character traits where characters just put so much burden on themselves and feel like they're responsible for the whole world. And they kind of suffer in silence upon the brave face, because I just really admire people who can do that and the strength that shows. So I really loved how they introduced that plot point with Julian. And we have like the rest of the kids kind of working in the background, where we find out finally who the titular Lady Midnight is. Of course being Annabelle Blackthorne. And again, the whole kind of family ties thing, it's a Blackthorne who's like the main mystery, and we see whoever was behind all this is, and this group of people who attacked them was trying to bring back someone from the dead, and they kind of piece together through like poetry and stuff that they're trying to bring back Annabelle, aka Lady Midnight. And the continuing revisitation of Emma and Julian's relationship when they kiss again. And then we get a surprisingly brutal, and reminded me a lot of the Hunger Games, the second book in the Hunger Games, when Kieran and Gwyn and everyone from the Wild Hunt arrive and say Mark needs to be punished and whipped and stuff because he told Christina kind of some fairy secrets, during which Jules then takes Mark's place for that punishment, and then Emma again takes Julian's place. So again, it's really like personal consequences as opposed to the world's going to end or half of humanity's going to be wiped out. The stakes are so personal, and I feel like that just gets you a lot more invested in the characters and the plot for me. And that's something the Dark Artifices has always kind of excelled at. So we have that whole sequence, and following Emma having to recover from her injuries, taking on behalf of Jules. Jules finally confesses his love for her and shows her like all the paintings and stuff he'd done of her. Which is kind of a punch to the air moment, but it's also bittersweet because you're almost like, you know, this is going to go wrong. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to me? And then we get a bit more kind of revelations about Annabelle and Malcolm, and the past with them, and everyone works out that Malcolm was kind of the big bad, and he's the one trying to bring Annabelle back from the dead because it's his lost love. And he's also kidnapped Tavi to kind of complete his ritual because he needs Blackthorn blood to bring Annabelle back. And he hasn't really been helping them all this time. He's actually been kind of keeping them in the dark about things. And I really like that twist. I did not see that coming about Malcolm at all. I was like, oh, Malcolm's so wholesome. They had pizza at his house and everything. And then we got this. And I was like, damn. Cassandra Clare knows how to pull off a good plot twist for me. I barely ever see these things coming. And then Kieran tries to kind of redeem himself for what he's done, so he's kind of helping them out. Mark says, you know, put some runes on me, I'm a Shadowhunter, so we have this really nice arc for him, even though there's still more to do with Mark throughout the rest of the trilogy, because obviously he kind of has his love triangle he's in the middle of. And a lot of people feel like all three of them are going to end up together in like a weird kind of relationship. I'm not sure if I feel comfortable with that being the solution. If you've seen my other video, you know I want Mark and Christina to be together, because I don't really like Mark and Kieran together. But that's the other video. But I really liked how we had that overarching thing with Mark that is going to continue, but we still get a complete arc for him in this first book, where he kind of tries to reconnect with all his family and realises what is real in his life and everything after years away. And he is a Shadowhunter, he's not going to be completely affected by his time in the Fairy, so I love that arc for him. And you know, we find out that Malcolm was the one who killed Emma's parents, so we have that huge mystery solved. Then it's this huge, awesome kind of epic battle sequence, which I feel Shadowhunters books always do really well. Normally I kind of get bored by like long drawn out battle sequences, but I always find them quite captivating in Shadowhunters books, which is always good. And that obviously ends with Malcolm's death, but before he kind of gets taken away and sunk to the bottom of the ocean with like sea demons and stuff, he mentions to Emma about a Parabatai curse, which kind of sets up a kind of tragic end for the first book and a huge part of the second and for sure the third books as well. So while we advance the story of this book, underneath all that there's some kind of subtext that will carry on, very subtly done in future books. So I love that it's set up, but it's not kind of shoved down our throats. Then, because Malcolm dies, the protection of Johnny Rook fades, so Johnny is killed, which leaves Kit kind of on his own and defenceless, so he has to text Emma to kind of ask for help, which brings him into the role for the next book and beyond. So I love how he was kind of brought back into the action near the end of the story. Ty and Mark have a big blowout fight, and when Mark goes to see Christina to kind of talk things through about it, so he's kind of told Kieran like he can never forgive him and stuff like that, and he'll always be there for him, but he can't be with him. He sees Christina and Diego kissing. I sighed deeply in that moment. I was like, for God's sake, just make out, fall in love. But of course, Diego. Perfect Diego. Perfect bloody Diego. I mean, I don't mind Diego that much, considering what we know about him now, but still. And then we get more tie-ins, because Jem and Tessa show up, which makes my heart so happy, because I love them. And they kind of help Emma save Kit, who is revealed to be Christopher Herondale, like the lost Herondale, who Tessa and Jem had been searching for so long. So I loved how that revelation kind of brought about a lot of changes in the grand scheme of things, because Jace has another Herondale relative out there now. So I love how that revelation really shook things up in terms of the lore. And then Jem kind of tells Emma all about the Parabatai curse and how it would kind of turn them into monsters if they carried on the path they were on. So Emma kind of decides that she can't do that anymore with Julian, and has to kind of end things and call things off and tell him that she doesn't love him. And when he doesn't believe her, she goes to Mark and says, we need to pretend to be in a relationship. And I will say, I don't like how the book ended with Emma kind of proposing this idea, and then Mark was like, well, why should we lie? Let's just like be genuine about this relationship. I just felt it was kind of an unnecessary thing, especially because it was kind of thrown away almost instantly in the second book anyway. I don't know, I just never quite gelled with that ending. I feel like Mark could have just agreed to it and not said, well, it could just be genuine, why do we need to lie? It just felt kind of strange. But, you know, it is what it is. It was an interesting obstacle for them in the future books. So I'm here for it. And then Malcolm's blood kind of mixes in with the ocean and everything and gets inside Annabelle's coffin, and she seems to be starting to wake up. Again, set up for some major things to come in the second book. So overall, I think Lady Midnight was a really great reintroduction to some characters we knew, introduction to some new ones. It had its very personal stakes, a very personal story that was going through, while also very cleverly and subtly setting up the future of the trilogy and future things through Shadowhunters Chronicles as a whole. And everyone kind of got their moment to shine. There were some cool plot twists. I really got invested in Emma and Jules' romance, and Mark and Christina's romance, and Mark and Julian as characters. I just think are absolutely fascinating. And I just love the setting of the LA Institute and everything. Christina, so that you can kind of see everything I've gone through, and that's not even everything that happens in Lady Midnight. It is absolutely packed with stuff, this book. But I think the balance is basically perfect. There are like a few scenes with like when it's just like Ty and Livia and Drew and all that. I'm like, yeah, okay, can we get back to my favourite characters now? But I still enjoy them for what they are. So there are kind of moments where things kind of slow down. But I think overall this was a really great start to this trilogy. And got me invested right off the bat. So it did what it needed to do. And then we come to Lord of Shadows. Ta-da! It's Julian on the front, you can see. It's kind of like a reflective thing, so I don't know if it picks it up very well in the light. Oh, and I didn't mention, they both have like the Parabatorium on the side, which I like. And this one has blue pages. I don't know why. I don't mind coloured pages, so it's alright. But if they were going to do that, I kind of wish they did the same with Lady Midnight. So I'm interested in seeing what colour pages are going to be in Queen of Air and Darkness. Maybe they'll all be different colours, who knows. But yeah, Lord of Shadows. I think overall, I liked Lord of Shadows better than Lady Midnight. I think it is a really great book. So I kind of took my time at first with Lady Midnight, and then once I really got into it, I kind of binged it. Whereas Lord of Shadows, I finished it in like 2-3 days. I just absolutely binged it. It helped that the day it came out, I had to get a train home, a 2.5-hour train home for like a doctor's appointment, because I was about to have a knock on my jaw, so I needed like a checkup and make sure everything was okay for it. So I had to go on like a 2.5-hour, 3-hour journey. So that gave me 3 hours. I bought the book on the way to the train station, got on my train, read it, spent 3 hours straight just reading it. So I got a pretty good head start, and it just captivated me right from the start. Kind of helps because we don't really need to introduce loads of new things. We know the characters, we know the general plot, we know kind of a bit what to expect. Here we go. And I really liked how Lord of Shadows included a lot more of the characters we know and love previously, like Jason Clary showed up for a good portion at the beginning. Magnus is in it, Alex in it, Robert Lightwood is in it for a bit, and just things like that. We keep coming back to the Mortal Instruments characters, which I really love. And I believe at least Jem is in it, I think, at some point. I can't remember for sure. But I love how it's very much a connected universe, even though each kind of series of books is telling its own thing. There are still crossovers, which I really like. So yeah, we kind of start off with Jason Clary interacting with Kit. I really liked that we kind of started off with Jace talking to his relative, I suppose. I really liked that interaction. And just seeing Jason Clary kind of be together again and be in a book was just always exciting, because we've come so far with those two. And then we see Clary kind of interacting with Emma. I've always loved their relationship, so I love that got highlighted. And Clary kind of opens up to Emma that she's been having dreams about her death, which I believe we're going to get answers for in Queen of Air and Darkness. I think Cassandra Clare said we will get answers for that. But yeah, and Jace asked Clary to marry her, but because she sees these visions of her going to die, she said no. So that got me instantly worried. I was like, fucking hell, this is not good. and there's lots of kind of overarching themes that will probably tie into like the very last book of Shadowhunters, the whole Chronicles. Maybe particularly with like the warlocks, all losing their magic and stuff as well. There's just these subtle themes that are spread in really nicely, even though this is still very much like Emma's story. So I love that. We kind of get a bit more insight into Emma and Mark. It's a very platonic kind of relationship, but they're keeping up appearances. And Kit is kind of starting to, I suppose, to get accustomed to the world of Shadowhunters and being a Shadowhunter. And we kind of see this instant bond with Ty as well, which might become a parabatai bond. Because obviously Olivia wanted to be parabatai with Ty. He didn't want that, because he wanted to join like the Scholomance and stuff. But I feel like the death at the end of this book might change his mind, and he might become parabatai with Kit, which would be interesting. And then Kit kind of picks up on Ty having autism. I really like the representation in Lord of Shadows. We get quite a lot I wasn't expecting to get, so I really liked that. So yeah, Kit kind of talks to Jules and said, you know, Ty has autism, and Julian doesn't really know what that is. So I really like how that explains a lot of Ty's actions, and it's just a very interesting kind of thing, because in this world of demons and Shadowhunters and vampires and all that, I love that we still have these very real human conditions that we can relate to. So I love how Ty's condition plays into the overall story. And then we have like the Centurions arriving along with Zara. I hope Zara dies, I really do, genuinely. She's such a bitch. But yeah, we get an introduction to her. And she's revealed to be Diego's fiancée, which Christina is not particularly thrilled about, shockingly. So there's kind of a whole mess there. Every romance has to have a blockade in it, doesn't it? So we get that, and then through that we kind of get more exploration into Christina and Mark's bond, because they've grown very, very close and they clearly have feelings for each other. But they can't really properly act on it because of Mark and Emma's kind of fake relationship. That still leads to Jules and Emma kind of kissing again. Just a constant reminder that these feelings are not going away between these two. And just the whole idea of their parabatai falling in love, I love that twist in like the typical Shadowhunters romance, if you will. I really like how they really switch things up and through a, you know, earth-shattering obstacle in between Emma and Julian. And we find out Kieran's going to be executed for his crimes in Fairy, and Mark initially refuses to go and help, but then he decides against that. So he goes to Fairy, and Christina and Emma and Julian kind of are drawn into that plot as well. And during all that, Livy and Kit seem to have a bit of a connection going, because Livy asks Kit to kiss her. Obviously, it's not really going to go anywhere. I don't think it was going to go anywhere anyway. But I like how they kind of explored like a very young romance with those two, however briefly. Then we learn a bit more about how much of a bitch Zara is, because she wants to oust Arthur. She kind of knows the truth about him not being fit to run the Institute. Kind of wants to put her own family in there. And then in Fairy, Mark and Christina like join this like fairy party and stuff, and Christina thinks that she's under the influence of something in something she drank, so she kisses Mark. But when it turns out she's not under the influence of anything, Mark gets kind of annoyed that she'd only kiss him when she thought, you know, she was kind of not in control of herself. So that leads to a big fight, and during this time they've kind of had a binded spell put on them, which they don't realise, which is kind of almost a comical kind of story, but also not. So it kind of foreshadows how deep their connection goes, because they have a physical connection as well as an emotional one. So I liked that kind of parallel with them. But during that fight, Christina accidentally reveals to Mark that Julian is in love with Emma, which was very interesting. I love that we got a lot of revelations. This Lord of Shadows is very much about loads and loads of secrets coming out and loads of revelations, which I really enjoyed. Lots of people found out lots of things that they could have dragged out into the third book, but they didn't, and I love that choice. And then, oh yeah, the kids find out the extent of Arthur's condition, and that Jules has actually kind of been running things for him for a very long time. So again, all these secrets being found out. And Mark and Emma kind of have a very stern chat once Mark knows the truth about Julian's feelings for her, and says they can't really keep up the charade of them being together anymore, which I think was the right thing to do on Mark's part, and I really like that he did that, because he's very much learnt to allow himself to feel things for his family again, which I love, and I love that Christina kind of really helped him understand that. And then they all travel to the Unseelie Court, and there's this big kind of battle there to save Kieran. And during this, there's an attack on the Institute, and we find out that Malcolm's kind of alive. He's back from the dead, and leading his kind of army of sea demons, because he's still very much determined to bring Annabelle back. And I really liked him coming back. I wasn't expecting that at all. So that was another cool twist with the same character. They fooled me twice. I'm a fool. And then through Kieran being tortured in the Unseelie Court, he it's revealed that he's kind of forgotten his betrayal of the Shadowhunters in the previous book, which leaves Mark in a very interesting kind of position, because Kieran doesn't remember that happening and him doing that. So did it still really count that he did? Personally, I still feel like he should be held accountable for his actions, and he gets his memories back anyway. But it was interesting to put Mark in that position. Like, does he need to kind of keep up the charade that they're together now? He's just finished like pretending that he was with Emma, and now there's another relationship he has to pretend to be in, which I think was kind of interesting. And then the Seelie Queen returns. I love seeing the Seelie Queen, so that was really cool. Which kind of shows Emma that Arthur had sacrificed himself to give his blood to Malcolm, which Malcolm uses to raise Annabelle. Then Annabelle's like, bye Malcolm, and kills him. I love how that kind of, his own creation, or his own plot, turned against him, in a similar vein to how it worked with Valentine. His plot was to, raise the angel Raziel, and he did that, and then Raziel was like, bye Valentine, you're dead. So I liked that kind of parallel with those two villains. And then we see Zara continues to be a bitch, and is taking credit for everything, and taking credit for stopping Malcolm and the sea demons, even though Malcolm's second death at Annabelle's hands is what caused all the demons to be destroyed. And then we learn a bit more about how Mark and Christina have got that binding spell on them, which causes a lot of tension between those two and Kieran, continuing that love triangle. And then Ty and the others are going on their own kind of separate journey to get this crystal that contains some of Annabelle's memories that they could use to unravel a bit more of this mystery. And that leads them to the Shadow Market to kind of investigate this crystal further, during which they're kind of going to get attacked because everyone's kind of turned on Kit after he's been outed as a Shadowhunter. And then Magnus freaking Bane shows up, and he's like, you leave those kids alone, or I'll I don't know, Avada could have you. Not exactly that. But I loved how Magnus came back into the fold and had a bigger role to play in this story as opposed to Lady Midnight. So that was great seeing him again. And then Jules and Emma are drawn to Cornwall, I think it was, which is basically where I am, so that's cool. And there's like this cottage kind of place, I think it was, where Annabelle and I think Malcolm used to go. And Annabelle is she is there. And Jules tries to talk to her, but when Emma appears, Annabelle's kind of scared off. And I love the exploration of different generations of Blackthorns in this bit with Emma and Julian and everything. Like, that family bond again is just something Shadowhunters does so well, the idea of family. Because even earlier in the book, we had different generations of Herondales with Jace and Kit, so I love how that is a constant theme in these books. And then Jamie, Diego's younger brother, is kind of drawn into the action. He turns up and asks Christina to help and be hidden and stuff. And Jamie then in turn kind of forms a bond with Drew, which I imagine will probably go somewhere. Then we further the love triangle with Mark and Christina dancing, and then Kieran kind of joins in and dances with Christina. And they almost seem to have a weird moment, which I'm not really a fan of, but that's fine. We'll see where they go with that. And later on, Kieran is kind of put in this situation by Eric, I think his name is. It's like other fairy guard or something. So told to like kill Christina to kind of prove his loyalty to the fairies or the fae. And he just kills Eric. So he's kind of starting to redeem himself a little bit in our eyes, but I still can't really forgive him for what he's done in Lady Midnight. And then back in Cornwall, I believe, Julian and Emma fight these riders who are after, is it the Dark Volume, the Black Volume, something like that. They're after that, and obviously Julian and Emma never had that, but they have to fight them off. And then the revelations come out about their true feelings to each other. Emma kind of tells Julian that she loves him too, and they sleep together again, which always bodes well. Well done, guys. Good job. You go. You get some. I mean, I was completely rooting for it, so I was like, yes, when that happened. Even though I knew, every time Emma and Julian bang, something horrible is going to happen. It's just kind of the rule, and that scares me. Then we get a bit more truth about Diego, and that all was not what it seemed in the way he got engaged to Zara, and how he apparently treated Christina and Christina's family. So I love the kind of blurred lines between what's right and wrong, and not knowing the full truth about something in both Diego and Kieran's characters. So I like how they kind of paralleled those two characters in different ways. And then Emma kind of tells Julian all about the Parabatai curse, and they kind of wonder what to do about it. And then we get this really awesome moment where Magnus kind of walks in on them together, and when he arrives at the cottage, and he's like, well, this is awkward. I love that he kind of just casually got dropped in on that huge revelation, and he just takes it in his stride. Probably seen a lot worse in his many centuries alive. And then Drew goes through a portal that was in Jamie's bag, I think, under his bed. She kind of investigates and goes through that, and she's taken to Fairy, where she meets this kid about her age called Ash, and I think he's going to be showing up in Queen of Air and Darkness, because we don't really know a lot about him, so there's that mystery set up with those two, because it's a very brief scene. There are a lot of rumours about who he could be. One theory is that he's the child of the Seelie Queen and Sebastian, which would be interesting. But we'll see where they go with that, so I'm very excited to see Ash pop up again. So I loved how they set up that mystery. And then we've kind of seen Diana and Gwyn. I don't think I've mentioned Diana yet, but I love Diana. She's a really cool character. She's kind of always had to help out the kids in both the books so far, protect her at all costs. And she's kind of developed this really nice, sweet connection with Gwyn, and she opens up to him and reveals that she used to be David. So again, more representation, which I was not expecting at all, but I really like that direction they took with Diana as a character. And I really like their sweet little bond between those two. The unlikely pairings, it just gets me. And Kieran gets his memories back, which causes a whole load of drama. Kieran's very dramatic, and I imagine that's why a lot of people really like Kieran. I've never quite connected with him. Maybe I will in the next one, but that's why I'm completely rooting for Mark and Christina. Don't at me. I apologise, my throat is kind of drying up because I keep talking. And then, in almost a parallel to Clary, Magnus opens up about dreams he's been having, because he used to have this recurring nightmare about bones and death and stuff, and he thought it was about the Dark War in the Mortal Instruments, because after that happened his dreams stopped, but they've started up again. So more kind of foreshadowing of something huge coming, maybe not in Queen of Air and Darkness, maybe, the final trilogy, the Shadowhunters Chronicles, who knows. But I love the speculation of when these plot points that get introduced are actually going to be tied up. I find that very exciting, and something Cassandra Clare's always done so well. And then Magnus and Julian kind of talk about Julian and Emma's relationship, and Magnus suggests that Julian and Emma talk to the Inquisitor, who is of course Robert Lightwood. And and suggests that they get exiled away from each other to kind of sort out this whole Parabatai curse nonsense, hoping that he'll understand. And I really like that Magnus kind of trusted Robert and suggested Robert for that moment. It shows how far those two have come. And then we kind of find out that Kieran almost only really betrayed the Shadowhunters in order to save Mark's life, so those two kind of make up, which kind of balances out the love triangle again for people who are fans of Kieran and Mark together. And Annabelle shows up out of the blue, and it turns out Ty has sent her a letter talking about all the Blackthorns as individuals and saying that the Clay's different, they can help her now, as long as she can help them in return. And she kind of agrees to testify about like Malcolm's death and everything to kind of stop Zara, the bitch, in her tracks from taking all the credit and trying to take the Institute. So I really liked all of that. And then that therefore leads them all to Adris. And Annabelle is giving this test to Moni and stuff, and everyone's kind of calling her a liar and a heckler, and she needs to hold the mortal sword for her to be believed in everything. And it just shows how fucking awful the Clave can be and what arseholes there are in the world. And kind of very poignant to a lot of real world kind of situations right now, which I think is very timely and very emotionally effective in that sense. I really like how relatable a lot of these things can be to real life. And then Emma and Julian talk to Robert about things, and they kind of agree to this whole exile idea and to keep them apart. She's like, oh good, okay, that's progress, maybe they're going to get this sorted out. And we see Helen and Aileen show up, which I love because we get the full Blackthorn reunion before one of the Blackthorns is cruelly snatched away from us, but I like seeing those two characters pop up again. And again, this overarching theme, Magnus seems to not be too well, and then he collapses, and it's revealed that a lot of the Warlocks are kind of going through this weird like loss of magic and loss of strength. So there's this overarching mystery. Don't know when that will be solved, maybe in Queen of Air and Darkness, maybe after that. So I'm really excited to see that. Very interesting kind of plot idea, so I love that. And another great idea I think this book threw up was that the Seelie Queen told Julian a way to break the Parabatai bond. There was a way to do it with like the dark book or black thing. I can't remember the exact wording, but that thing. There's a way to kind of break the Parabatai curse between Emma and Julian, but doing that would break every single Parabatai bond. So that was interesting, raising the stakes again in that way. But yeah, Annabelle is testifying. Everyone's not really believing her. She has to hold a mortal sword, and she was like tortured with it before, so it's kind of awakening this really awful thing inside of her, this darkness, and something just snaps inside of her. She has this huge character change. It's absolute chaos in this like a court hall, and during this escalation she kills Robert, which I was not expecting, because Robert's kind of been there since the Mortal Instrument, so it's crazy to see him die. Very interested in seeing how Alec and Isabel and all that are going to deal with the after effects of Robert's death. Should be very interesting, because we know Simon and Izzy are turning up in Queen of Air and Darkness, so I'm excited for that. Should be interesting, because obviously they lost Max, and now they're going to have to deal with losing their dad, so my heart breaks for the Lightwoods, basically. So we had that huge shock death. I thought, wow, God, it's a huge death, that's probably it. Then Kieran leaves with Diego to go to the Scholar Manse so he can be protected, so that's going to be kind of a plotline for him in the third book, I'm assuming. And Emma tries to fight Annabelle with her sword, and ends, well, the sword's called Cortana, I think, and then with Cortana she ends up destroying the soul sword, and the mortal sword it breaks, which is crazy. Again, these like, Cassandra Clare isn't afraid to have things happen that will change the whole of Shadowhunters verse forever, and I love that. You never know what's going to happen. And then with the piece of that sword, in this like crazed rage, Annabelle stabs Livy through the heart and kills her. Man, what a shocking way to end the book. It's insane, it's tragic, because like this young girl's been killed, Julian like sobbing over her body, like a grieving father, my god, it was awful. Because we'd just seen Robert die, so a father had just been killed. And there was like his child, because Alec was there for him. Alec was kind of cradling his dead father, and then we kind of switched that around with Libby's death, and we kind of have the father being the one who's still alive in terms of Julian cradling their dead child. Tragic, shocking ending to the book. Cannot wait to see what on earth's going to happen in Queen of Air and Darkness with that ending, because it absolutely broke my heart. It's so sad, but such an amazing cliffhanger. Cannot wait to see how they're going to continue this in Queen of Air and Darkness. It's going to be good. I'm really hopeful. It's going to be a really great end to this trilogy. I'm hoping Mark and Christina will get together, hopefully, please. I'm hoping Julian and Emma will find a way to work things out. I'm hoping everyone I love will survive. And yeah, I hope Annabelle gets what's coming to her, and I hope Zara gets what's coming to her. But yeah, overall, I think I really, really liked Lord of Shadows. I think it's definitely my favourite of the Dark Artifices so far. Loved all the character work it did. Loved where the plot went for the most part. Some really shocking moments, some great plot twists. Really invested in a lot of the romances. And it was just a kind of non-stop thrill ride from start to finish for me. I could barely put it down. I only really put it down to eat and sleep. Which is testament to how incredible it was. An amazing entry to the Dark Artifices. Cannot wait to see how this is all going to wrap up. Queen of Air and Darkness has some huge shoes to fill and a huge kind of thing to follow, because I really love Lord of Shadows, and I'm loving the Dark Artifices so far. Really invested in the characters and the story. Cannot wait to see how it's all going to wrap up for these. I'm really hoping everyone's going to be fine, but you just know, not everyone's going to get that happy ending, and that scares me, but also excites me, because I cannot wait to find out. 9 AM on December 4th, when Waterstones opens, I'm buying that Blade book, and that's it. That'll be me for like 2-3 days. I'm so hyped, cannot wait. So yeah, that's the Dark Artifices. I love this series so far. Cannot wait to see how it's going to wrap up. Love the characters, love the plot twists, love the story, love what it's done in terms of general Shadowhunter stuff and beyond. Sorry, I just got a text to see if it was important, but it's not. It's just Domino's. I might order a pizza now. But yeah, love the Dark Artifices. Cannot wait to see where the story's going to go. And let me know your thoughts on the Dark Artifices, who your favourite characters are, what plot lines you like, everything like that. How do you think it's going to wrap up in the next book? I'm very excited. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts, so do let me know. And yeah, very exciting times ahead. So soon, like 2 weeks until the Dark Artifices ends. Madness. But yeah, until tomorrow's video, thanks for watching.